Hey, everybody, welcome. It is my sincere, singular pleasure to introduce my dear longtime friend from Skyline Days, Ted Tagami. And
Easy.
man, this is our own little mini reunion, but we're not going to go there, right?
You could if you wanted to get in trouble, but
Great to have you, my man.
good to see
We're going
you.
to talk about something that is of extreme importance, and well, rather, Ted's going to talk more about it than I am. But it's his company, Magnitude IO, is in search of a strategic partner. And what Magnitude IO does is path breaking. But I also want to applaud Ted for all the work that he's done in educating us about space and space exploration and the work that he's done in space. So, Ted, congratulations.
Oh, thank you, Zenny. A lot more than just me, that's for sure. Often, might see me in the parade, but there are a lot of other folks in there as well. I have to give a shout out. We started this company back on a dare back in 2013 with a dear friend who's no longer with us, my co-founder Tony. So I think Tony passed away in 2022.
Oh, sorry.
And that's well, thank you, Zenny. But that's the main impetus and why you saw my brother Phil post something. And I'm pretty keen on what that means by being strategic. But I think before we even go down that path and talk about what that is, probably talk about perhaps where the world is today and some interesting things that are happening in our lifetime. You and I are the same age where, I mean, they went to the moon.
Yeah.
They were bouncing around the moon for a few days and they get back on their little ship and they'd fly home. And what happened, right? What happened? Various things, I guess, Cold War, whatever. But it's back. And a lot of it we hear in the States here around what's called the Artemis Accords. Of course, go back to mythology. Artemis is the sister of Apollo. So it makes sense, right? Maybe she should have been picked first. But anyway, the Artemis Accords are more than 36 countries that have written a non binding agreement to build a settlement on the south pole of the moon. Wow, right? If you're following this cadence at all, it's happening. And none of this was really formally announced back when we started in 2013. But my dear friend Tony, who convinced me this was something worthwhile, came to me on my 50th birthday. So it's more than a decade ago. And he said, Ted, we can sell advertising in space.
Wow.
And I'm like, Zenny,
Wow.
I'm like, Tony, this is great, but no. Right. What was the takeaway? The takeaway was here's a dear friend coming to me saying that a civilian could do something in orbit. And maybe this has always been around. I just wasn't paying attention. I was doing nothing even directly related to what magnitude is today. And so I was like, okay, Tony, let's talk a little bit more about what this is. And it so happens it was a small satellite company, a CubeSat company. We can talk about the origin of those if you like. Professor Twiggs there at Stanford and some other guys kind of came up with this idea in the late 90s. But basically, instead of launching water and sand into space as a ballast, rocket equation, you got to be, everything's got to work well for the propellant you've loaded up and what have you. That they to make a ballast, they usually put sand and water in, or did. And the professor there at Stanford, Bob Twiggs, is retired now, and another guy down at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, Jordy Pugsiarg, came up with this idea of an interoperable platform. Here's a 3D printed kind of version of that, right? The cube
Cool.
stack. So imagine a 10 centimeter cube. And they would fit this, or they proposed to fit it inside a rocket.
I gave you a solo layout so you can show people. Do that again, Ted.
Oh, yeah, sure. This is just a 3D printed shell of what would be called a 1U equivalent. Think
Mm-hmm.
about, for my brother, intermodal transportation, right? That
Right.
40-foot container on the back of a rail car or a ship on the ocean.
Yeah.
This is intermodal transportation for space. Well, it looks like it. Actually, it looks more like this. This is actually something that's been in space. Talk about that in a second. But so much smaller. But so this company said, hey, listen, we're going to put stuff in orbit, these CubeSats, and then we're going to let students program them. Oh, how awesome is that? Let's get everyone lined up. 3 missions, and they failed to deliver on this promise. And we signed up at that point a couple hundred schools, of course, fairly disappointed, needed a pivot. and through just how you meet people when you're doing something new and
Yep.
you're curious. And I think one thing that drives me is I've always been curious. So we just meet a lot of people in this whole new frontier of what's happening in space today. And these CubeSats that they're putting into orbit, there was a young startup. So actually, it wasn't even a startup when we met them. Was building or proposing to build cube laboratories. These
Hmm.
labs that would go up aboard a rocket. This is before SpaceX.
Mm-hmm.
Like a ULA rocket or something in Northrop Grumman, and get up to the space station, and be installed in this thing that's larger than a football field.
Yeah.
It's been in orbit for more than 2 decades. In fact, when I go to a school, K to 12, every single kid on that school there's been something in orbit with people on it longer than they've been alive.
Wow.
Right? A continuous operation. And of course, they're going to deorbit the space station at
What
the
about
end of the decade.
Skylab, by the way? Remember Skylab?
Yep, Skylab was an interim step. The Chinese to have their own station now. If you're following along, they've got the Heavenly Palace is the translation to the second one, and they have their taikonauts up there doing experiments, and they've just sent a rover and payload to the far side of the moon. They want to actually sample some lunar regolith and send it back. Stuff's happening. So anyway, this was great. It's advertising, no. My sons were in high school. Tony's daughters were in middle school. And I said to Tony, well, you know what? Education could probably lose a little bit of a fix. We look at competitiveness and what the world needs today. And this device that we have in everyone's pocket, this phone, is magic. People really
Yeah.
don't even know how it works, right? How does my Instagram go from what you in front of me here to now people can see it around the world?
Right.
It's not magic, people. It's electricity and physics and a bunch of other stuff. Let's start unbundling the magic and talk about what's really there, because in tomorrow's world, although I think there's a lot of promise for artificial intelligence and what have you, we're going to need people that understand what they're doing. And so the hope there with magnitude is making a change in education, orders of magnitude, more than what we see. Took about 4 years after we started this to actually get something up to the space station, in 2017, February 2017, on historic pad 39A, which was just kind of rechristened. We got a ride on the SpaceX 10 resupply mission to the space station, and that was a start, right? My background is not science or engineering, dude, right? I mean, it's like I studied art in school, and I left I didn't even finish. I left school to start a business and done a number of businesses between then and now. And so it was like, wow, this is amazing. We can actually put things in orbit and operate them to the benefit of all. But all the smart people, as we're getting ready to do this, it took about 2 years once we actually got underway to put something on the space station. I want to do a whole bunch of different things. Like, okay, what can we fit in these boxes, right? Let's study bugs, right? What would you study? You're going to send something to space, Zanny. What would you study? What would you do?
I would send. You know what? I would love to study how an automobile engine, a combustible automobile engine, works in space.
Oh,
You
there
know
you go. Oh my
what?
gosh.
I've never, I have never seen any report of anybody trying to do that. Now, you might think, oh, it pollution and everything, and rightly so, but we have mitigation devices for that. I just want to see how it works in space. I just want to know how the physics of being up there impacts it. That's all I want to know.
Well, so that's interesting. So, layperson here, right? Let's go bring in the experts, the fluid physicists, and the atmospheric researchers and the material science folks, and they'll tell us what's going on. But you think about it, there is no convection, right? There's heat doesn't. Where's heat going to go? It doesn't rise, right?
Right.
You light a match in microgravity. What happens to that flame, Zenny? You have any idea? You probably know, right?
Uh,
What would you imagine it would look like, right?
I imagine it would kind of just look like you couldn't recognize it. It would disperse.
It
There's
just
no
looks like a
reason
little
for it.
ball.
Yeah.
There's some you can go search for it if you like, and maybe even find a little clip you throw in here. But little blue ball basically burns out the oxygen around it, and right, it goes out. The astronauts, when they go to sleep, they need to have a continuous fan blowing, because as they exhale the carbon dioxide, what's it do? It sits around like a big fat bubble around their head.
I believe I have found a representative um,
There you go.
example.
Yeah, there you go.
I will post here.
You're quick with your
Oh,
fingers.
there we go.
Oh, there
Right.
you go. Yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
yeah, yeah. And so, things happen differently. So there's so many different things that we wanted to be able to do. And then they said, well, you should probably focus. Well, entomology, look at bugs, material science, and we've met folks that are doing like brain organoids. They're flying to space. Artificial retinas now. Materials, of course, is always interesting. But what was really cool and simple, a lot less expensive than trying to send a person up, and if it didn't work, it was okay, was plants.
Hmm.
Without plants, we wouldn't be around for sure. I mean, they're taking in all the CO2 that we're exhaling, and they're kicking out all the oxygen that we love to have. And so there's this wonderful symbiotic relationship we have with plants. And of course, they look nice, they smell good. You can eat them. It's like a lot of
Yeah.
cool things with plants.
Yeah.
And so if we sent plants up, perhaps we can learn a little bit about how they might behave as our kind of companion earthling along with us on a voyage. And there's a lot of psychological studies we can talk about in our call today discussion, but benefits of plants just being around, feeling just comfort. And, was it forest bathings, what the Japanese call it, just like walking in a forest and just like being surrounded by nature. So those are elements there. In situ food production, or being, making your food where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Packaged food, you go to go grocery store, right? Every box has a best used by date on it. And NASA needs at least 5 years and prefers 7. And most food, although it might still be edible, your vitamins drop off dramatically. Your nutrients start to break down, and you don't get those essentials.
Hmm.
Um, no one wants space scurvy, basically, right? It's like, can
No.
you imagine, dude? Are
No.
we there yet? 6-month mission to Mars,
Yeah.
and you just start coming down with like an ailment, or coming back is probably going to be
You're
pretty expensive.
deteriorating faster,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
a sense. Wow.
yeah, yeah. So in situ crop production is pretty interesting, and we've fallen into this wonderful realm. Now our 11th mission's going up in September, 11th and 12th. Actually, we got 2 missions going up,
Yeah.
a little separate. One is a private mission with a museum down in Australia, and they're going to be studying some algae, some students there. And our global mission, we basically connect schools, science centers, libraries, and museums around the world to the lab when it's in orbit.
Hmm.
We'll be studying a model organism for legumes, like your green beans or your chickpeas or your soy, called Metacago truncatula. It's an ancient ancestor of alfalfa, basically, and its genome has been fully mapped, which is really great for our really wonky scientists, folks. They want to look at genetics and changes and what protein suddenly got kicked out because something else is happening under the stresses. Can they understand how plants maybe can produce food more rapidly, or survive in a changing climate, or grow in brackish water, more higher salt content? All this stuff is like way over my head as a layperson, but I get excited because globally now, we've been in contact and worked collaboratively with the universities. Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, just up the hill from us here, has done post-flight research for us, which is great. The Joint Genome Institute, looking to do some genetics analysis, providing we got to bring good samples back where it doesn't work. And so all that said, to get some to space has gotten more and more expensive. You hear about the price per kilogram going down, and it is going down, but there's so much venture capital money out there right now, the price is going up.
If I may, folks, for those of you watching, may not be aware, but watched Oppenheimer. The Lawrence, or Ernest Lawrence, mentioned in it is the person named after Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory that is helping Magnitude IO and Mr. Tagami. Just a little trivia there, but very important.
Oh,
That's
there you go. It's great. Anywhere in the world, whoever's listening here, you live near a university town. That's where the fertile thinking is happening, right?
yeah,
One would hope.
yeah.
The younger minds, new ideas, and maybe the older traditions as well. But having been born and raised adjacent to Berkeley, now living just north of Berkeley here, it's been amazing. Really grateful that we're here. And if I should live anywhere else, I would need to ensure that it was an international university where bright minds were coming together, thinking about the modern problems of the world. I mean, we connect and do all those things virtually. Here, you and I are, right? You're on the East Coast. I'm here in California, and we can chat. Others that might be listening and joining us. but there's something about physically being somewhere. I mean, the virtual reality and all that.
In Lake Merritt, though, Ted.
There you go. Right. Right. Exactly. So, I mean, that's what we're up to. It's very expensive to send stuff to space. What we've done in these 10 missions, with 2 coming up later this year, is focused on these lab experiments to go to space. And yeah, it's a pretty penny. And then getting that distribution out there, it's tough to scale, especially when you're looking at every 18 months or so running a mission.
Right.
So what do you do in the downtime? And so what I didn't share with you is how these are all connected. But fundamentally, the reason why I'm looking for a strategic partner now, having lost my dear friend, is we want to build out the digital side of the equation, the bits side of the equation, rather than the atoms, because atoms are very expensive. But here's some atoms right here. This is called Exolab.
Oh,
All right.
let me give you a solo layout here.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
And so this is essentially a 2U equivalent of that little cube lab I was showing you earlier, right? So something of 8 inches tall, about 20 centimeters by 10 by 10. This mimics the original volume of what we sent to space. I'll take the acrylic cover off so it's a little easier to see. It's designed for on-Earth activity in which the students are all connected via the Exolab. And I've got a separate device here I can mention, but to the mother experiment when it's in orbit. So here on Earth, we've got some, in this case, plants growing, or this was set up for algae. It's growing and capturing an image. It's the Internet of Things device, right? Carbon dioxide, temperature and relative humidity, the light levels coming from this, the variable light LED array. All this is a little mini computer that's being sent to the cloud. We're now looking at kind of data across hundreds of laboratories on Earth. Students are directly involved in thinking about the protocols they want to run for here on their local machines, trying to maximize the vibrant life. What kind of profile had they set up for the lighting conditions? What kind of material are they putting in for growth? How are they monitoring that? But also all starting with the same basic organism, right? This seed here.
So let me clarify something. That construct you just presented to us, right, is something that you all built from scratch.
That's right.
Right. In other words, I mean, so that someone doesn't get the idea that, hey, I can go to Sears and buy that. No. This is a specialized scientific instrument you all developed from scratch.
Yep. And here's what's interesting here. It's all about learning, right? The back end of this is really where the value is, the network of laboratories. And so at the edge, we've open sourced the hardware side. If someone wants to build their own laboratory, it doesn't even need to be constrained by the volume that we have in the Exolab today. If they wanted to put different sensors on it, a different type of camera, you want to do infrared, go for it. We just need to understand what device you're using, the product ID of the different sensors, so we can calibrate. All this stuff kind of goes to the mothership here. And now we've got, especially with these open network of laboratories, running on the same protocols, running experiments. Think with citizen science. What might you learn? And for this mission coming up, mission 11, Exolab 11, called Astrobotany, we'll be looking at the machine learning across all these devices to look for optimal CO2, temp and humidity, light levels, measuring dry mass and some other stuff like that. Maybe even going deeper into the genetics. But the idea here is, and just pull way back, how might we shake up learning where, you're not like in the lecture hall, just like listen to someone just drum on about chapter 5, which you already read at 2 a.m. because you had to.
Right.
And instead roll up your sleeves and get involved in a mission that might involve a scientist, an engineer, your peers and colleagues. Might require a journalist because you want to do some social media on it and some research maybe. A historian perhaps. The idea here is when you bring people together around a problem, they can kind of refine and define that problem more succinctly to the group's needs, right? I think about design thinking processes. And then they can find their role in that challenge, where we're not saying you're all going to do the same thing and this is what we're going to judge you on. But it's like, here's this problem. What role do you feel you'd be best at? I need a manager. I need a leader. I need someone that's going to be like an assistant or secretary. I need to have good practicing and communication amongst each other. Skills that are, if you look at the World Economic Forum, came out with a study in 2023
Mm-hmm.
called the Future Jobs Report.
Mm-hmm.
And so the top skills. So up to you, Zenny, what do you think a top skill might be for future jobs?
Programming.
Okay, right. Well, yeah, the programming would definitely be up there. Other skills.
Uh, hmm. This is going to sound odd, but monitoring. Uh, and I say monitoring because there's this idea that, and I'm probably using the wrong term for it, but there's this idea that in an artificial intelligence governed world,
Mhm.
computers can do things by themselves. But the reality is, and we see this with driverless cars,
Right, right.
is that you better not take your hand off the steering wheel. But you know what? We saw that with Bart. Remember when Bart first started running automatically? I have a photograph of myself and the late Lars Frigman arguing about something in black.
Right.
And they had Bart running automatically until things like the doors would open. So I would say that you need people who are trained in understanding, well, how to monitor machines and their behavior. Now,
Right.
maybe the wrong terminology, and if it is, somebody please type in what the right one
Oh,
is.
there you go. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So
You know,
we can go through just a number of different things we think would be important for the future. Here's what blew me away. With going through, they listed. This was interviewing, top corporates around the World Economic Forum, right, and for future of jobs and what they needed in their workers. You know what, dude? I'm going to list off the top 5. They're all what we call soft skills,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Which is amazing.
yeah,
Number 1,
yeah.
creative thinking,
Boom.
right? I've
Right.
had some graduate students from university or summer interns and winter interns come to me brilliant on paper, waiting for the next thing to do because they needed a set of instructions. Come on, dude. Here's the problem. What should you? Well, I don't know if it's going to be. Just go do it, right? If is anyone going to die? Is anyone going to get hurt? Give it a shot. Investigate. Be curious. So creative thinking, number 1. Number 2, analytical thinking.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? You can be creative, but if you don't really, you're you're squirrely over here. It's not going to help anybody out. So
Solve
does this make sense, right?
problem solving.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thinking about how to work through and being kind of resilient to that. And so the third skill here is kind of a combination of words: resiliency, flexibility, and agility. I'm thinking mental agility, right? So, hey, this is the way I thought the world's supposed to work. It's not working that way for me. Uh-oh, I better adapt. I better look. Motivation and self-awareness. Number 4. Number 5 was curiosity
Mhm.
and lifelong learning. And if you look at it's kind of hard to see on my shirt here, jacket, powered by curiosity is our trademark. As an art guy, starting a tech company that goes to space, there you go,
Yeah.
powered by curiosity. That's what drives and motivates me. And I am at 61, not afraid to say, I don't understand. What are
Yeah.
you talking about? Can you explain it to me like I'm 5 years old? And then, you know what? I'm going to open up my mind. And Paul Erdos, right? Is my mind open?
Hmm.
And can you help me understand this amazing phenomenon? What is hard X-ray tomography, right? What's single cell transcriptomics? What does that mean to me? Why is that important in the future? And I'll say I know a very thin layer across a lot of different things, but if I have a real deep need, maybe a student has a question, or a school or a district or one of our projects, it's like, let's go find the expert. And you know what? When we were young, when we were in school, we had to go to the library, right? Do a decimal system, right? Or go find the who's who of America and like try to find the person you think is going to be the right one to talk to you about the problem.
We had to learn the Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah, what is Dewey Decimal? Someone right now is typing in Dewey Decimal.
Right.
Did
Right.
you spell it right? I was like,
Yeah.
it's wow, social media, right? You can say, well, let me go find an expert, right? Who's talking about it? Who is talking about them, even though they may not be broadcasting in social, like, oh, Dr. So and so or Mrs. Such and Such. Well, why is she doing it? And you can find the experts. Now, then the key here with anything, it's asymmetric. If you're a celebrity or you're very good at what you do, and everyone wants your attention, they don't have time for all that. It's just it's impossible, right? It's asymmetric. And so one has to bring value to the conversation. And if you understand, you can do a little homework. It's not stalking or anything like that, but you do a little homework about what drives and motivates this professional, then offer something that's going to help them and maybe help your program. Anyway, so that's what we've been doing with Magnitude. We're in like 14 countries. We work with the United Nations. We got a cool project happening
That's
right now in Australia. But a strategic partner, I'm not an operations guy. I'll be straightforward. I'm a creative thinker, and I like to come up with the wacky, crazy ideas. We've got a project right now we're working to be in collaboration with to get on the moon here by the latter part of this decade. I think it took us 4 years to get into low Earth orbit, and it'll probably take about the same amount of time to get to the lunar surface. But just being able to bring along students on that journey is what I'm excited about, and what might inspire them and instill them in ways I can't even imagine. And honestly, Zenny, most of them will probably never ever go into space, which is perfectly pretty cool. Are they being creative? Are they being analytical? Are they being resilient? Are they using these transferable skills that can go out and do? They're going to be an auto mechanic, or they're going to be a dog washer, or they're going to be an air traffic controller, or they're going to be a neurosurgeon. I mean, the world needs a lot of people doing a lot of different things. We need plumbers and electricians and carpenters, right? I mean, come on.
yeah.
And they're all, if you have a trade, a skill, knowledge, and you help society out, everyone's better for it. There's not one way to do things.
I pulled up your website, by the way. Excuse me. There we are. Your classroom is now in orbit. I love that. That's the tagline. What does that mean?
Yeah. So the idea here is we want to democratize space. It's not trivial to do something. And having 1,000 people design their own mission is something that's also not tenable. But if we can run a single mission and have everyone join us in the mission, and pay the fee to get on the train, right?
Yeah.
And it's a ticket for a kid is like $10, but they're in a 6-week program, and they're going to space with a bunch of other kids around the world, with kids in Senegal or in Germany or in Sri Lanka or Japan. It's really pretty awesome. And we do these live broadcasts. So when your classroom is orbit, literally about 2 weeks prior to the mission, we do a live broadcast similar to what you're doing here. And I'll have to check out this software using StreamYard. Looks pretty cool.
Oh, it's very cool. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been using Zoom just post-pandemic. That's kind of what we did. And we come in and we talk about the mission, we share cultural, there's a cultural exchange that happens as well, where we get to hear what's going on in South Africa, or what's going on in Portugal, or there in Australia, which is pretty cool. And student voice, right? We create the framework, and here's our mission, and we provide mission updates every week once we're in orbit doing live. We bring in celebrities. In the past, we brought in NASA researchers and engineers. Former astronauts have joined us, which is really pretty cool. And they have a chance to share their story, because I don't have that kind of story to share, right? I can only bring the people together. And then I'm kind of quiet, and I sit and get in the back. And then they can hear directly from someone with that knowledge. They've been in space, or they're doing the research with these plants. They're right there at Kennedy Space Center. And that's everything, because now the students have heard directly from the source. Now, kids of color, young women, they see someone that looks like them. When we bring them in for interviews, we really want to make sure we got a really good representation. It's like, wow, maybe I can do that. And maybe you can.
Right.
Maybe you can. When I was 6, that's when they went to the moon in 1969, right? I said I wanted to be an astronaut.
And, but Ted, it's funny how we've changed.
Mm-hmm.
When I was coming up, I never thought I couldn't do something because the person didn't look like me. And I thought the opposite. And I think I'll do a vlog on that later. I don't want to take up time here to do it because it's your time. But I just wanted to throw that in there. It's sad that I think what's happened is the internet has communicated, in particular to younger African American kids, in my opinion, the idea that there's so much racism they can't. And so there's been a lot of damage done there, because I didn't have anything to tell me or communicate to me on a multiple times daily basis that I couldn't dream or work for Walt Disney Company, or learn more about Epcot and urban planning. That I did all that when I was 8.
Right on.
Yeah, and
There you go.
I told the teacher at my school, Avalon Park in Chicago, I said, I can't learn. I was 9 years old, 10. I said, I can't learn at your school. And they had me tested, something called an IQ test. I had no idea what it was. And I scored a 156. And I thought, what is that? And they said, it means you're this. And I thought, oh, but my teacher said you can't possibly be that smart, basically, because I'm black, which is white.
Ooh.
And it blew me away. I really, she said, I'm going to have you retested. So it came out 131, do the average, right? But I'm thinking, I mean, that was my first personal taste with racism. Okay, the idea that,
Wow.
right? And that's where the damage comes in. And we still damage ourselves to this day, with wives' tale thoughts about who we are based on what we look like. So
Yeah. Wow. That's heavy, man. There's a here's something that I wasn't thinking about when we started Magnitude. I mean, doing cool stuff in space for kids around the world. That's pretty neat, right? And we're doing these live missions. It's cool. But we're actually, in a way, looking for top talent. Self-identifying top talent is coming to us, and you can see them within the first two meetings. Go into a region like Greater Sydney, 300 or 400 kids, and there'll be 2 or 3 of them that are like, well, keep an eye on that one. What's their name? What do they do? And then year 9, what are they like? Tell me more about your interests. And you follow them along, tag and release, man. And it's
yeah,
like, it's like going to a baseball field and looking at the young pitcher saying, is he going to be good in the majors?
yeah, they do it for the NFL. The NFL, they're tagging kids when they're like 11 years old.
That's right.
By the time they get high school, a bunch of people know about them already. How'd you know about them?
There you go. And so, there's science fairs and science competitions that do that. But also, I think what happens here is that we look for the absolute top, the pinnacle. And if everyone was the leader, right? We're the followers, right? Who are the people that don't want that responsibility or need that responsibility? They're really good at doing what they do. And the world needs an equal part of different folks to do different things. And so our work is those folks that really are doing, several orders of magnitude above the norm, posting what you're doing at the 150 some odd IQ, giving them the place to shine, but also having them develop their social skills, communication skills, the working together, and how do you work through challenges and problems. A big problem with our world now is we can't really work together. We always we get these oppositions. And the strongest thing we could do is find ways to remove those barriers and say, you know what, it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than us killing each other or whatever it is.
Right.
I don't want to get off topic, and so when you start at the top, you have a few identified students, then you have what's next, right? You've got the 98% or whatever, but there's that 30%. There definitely can move up and shine and help and maybe even pay back. They can go down even to younger grades or more remedial learners and bring them in inclusively. Say, man, you're pretty funny, man, but you don't get the math. Come along, because I think you can probably entertain us in a way that we need because we're too serious. And so everyone's got a role, right? Everyone's got a role.
If you had to crystal ball, I'm asking crystal ball what your perfect strategic partner might look like. Not only physically, I mean in terms of background.
Oh, right. It's tough. Magnitude, when we formed this, here's interesting, 2013, right? Summer of 2013, coming up year 11, June. I wanted to start a nonprofit, right? Because I was really thinking I had a really cool domain name I was sitting on for a long time. I thought this would be perfect. We're going to do education. And Tony, he wanted to build a unicorn, right? So Magnitude's that unicorn, right? A for-profit education space company. The nonprofit is a group. It's still active. It keeps all its filings up. Probably need to reconstitute my board, honestly. It's summer.org.
Summer.org.
That's the main name, right? Summer. Yeah, like fall and winter and spring.
Wait, you got summer.org.
Yeah. And
not freaking bad, man.
It's a good brand. And so what's summer.org's philosophy is the same philosophy that Magnitude has. Just Magnitude's air quotes here, for profit, right? And Summer is air quotes, nonprofit. but it's to serve. Back then, this is way before the pandemic in 2013. Summer learning loss.
Hmm.
What the heck is that? Well, go into inner city kid or go out in the rural community, in these underserved communities, and look at the children that summer. What are they doing? Hanging around the liquor store, right? Or they're
Right.
at home playing a video game and they're not doing
Right.
anything that really. I mean, the video games, some of them are really pretty cool, but I'm not going to get diss the video games. But maybe that more affluent family, they're off to that camp, summer camp, or they're doing robot programming at Stanford or whatever, right? They got the opportunity.
Or
And
the
what happens that
games
first,
themselves, right?
yep, exactly, making their own games. Year after year, what happens is you get this compounding effect of advantage, right?
Yeah.
And so your underserved communities, the idea of summer was to go out and do that. Magnitude does it basically 24/7 all around the planet. And I need to bring summer back. But the philosophy is back to your question, who's a great strategic partner? Understanding that the measurement of life isn't your bank account, number one.
Hmm.
I've done really well. Cool.
Hmm.
I can't say I've done extraordinarily well. I'm not broke. I'm not poor. I work hard to do what little I can. And so I'm grateful for everything that I've got. Family, wife, my kids. I'm really happy about the community I live in. But at the end of the day, when we're gone, when we're dust again, what has the world been given outside of what have I taken,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And so that partner needs to have that kind of mindset that the world is bigger than them, and that's a tough thing for some people, especially if they've made it. But if they can give back, our job is to preserve their wealth, not squander it,
Hmm.
right? And I like to say that we, over the last decade, we're putting stuff in orbit for pennies on the dollar. We're frugal innovators, right? That's what it takes,
Wow.
right? Yeah. And I've put 10 missions in space for probably the cost of maybe 1.5 missions,
Whoa.
right?
Nice
Right.
work, Ted.
Volunteers, students, we have simple experiments. There's that, and we're not trying to fly brain organoids. It's like, or study a new quantum material or something, right? So it's like, but it stair steps up. You start building up, and the technology is making it more accessible. And the space station itself is long in the tooth. It'll be decommissioned probably around 2030.
Hmm.
For those that are following space, you probably know about a company called Axiom, and
Yeah.
there's other space stations that are coming online. Axiom will basically build a habitat adjacent, connected to the space station. When they deorbit the ISS and just have it plunging into the Pacific, burning up in our atmosphere, the Axiom space station will be the takeover of that. And there's 2 or 3 other space stations that come up as
Hey,
well.
I'm ask you a question
Yep.
on that, just real quick. First of all, does the strategic partner have to be a person? Can it be a company?
It could be a company, absolutely.
And are you averse to being acquired?
Acquisition, that's something that's worth, I think, exploring. In a larger organization, if it's this would be fun to do, or this is because we have this initiative for Q3,
Sure.
or this is what we want to announce for 2025, to watch it get buried because they're no longer interested in that, screw it, not interested.
Right. Right. I hear you.
Right. Legacy, man. And it's gonna really, what I hope, that open sourcing our edge computing, right? Our architecture, the other side of the equation is we built this platform for learning, right? And in order for us to grow, reducing our costs here to get through, basically the pandemic was pretty tight. We're still here, plan to
Hmm.
be here for many, many more years.
Yeah.
Our platform, though, that we built for ourselves, is an interoperable concept. And that's probably think about the iceberg. Everything we talked about at this point is what you see above the water.
Hmm. Hmm.
The less sexy, and it's like, oh, that's been around since 2000 technology that has not yet been solved, is the 100 billion plus just in the US alone dollars being put into and being chased around STEM education, K through university. Now, we're not going to be able to get all that. In fact, we don't expect to. We're a sliver of that.
Hmm.
But our platform can bring in third parties that are really world class Oh, virtual reality, that's what you do. 3D printing, you're an expert, right? Science shows live and in person. There's these different elements that we can bring together and curate rather than create. Creating a product and getting it out there, managing the inventory, making sure everyone's happy, building that up is a hard gig. I mean, ask anybody. You have to be moving a lot of units to make it worthwhile, especially in the modern world. If you're talking about moving bits around, it's a heck of a lot easier. Little electrons, moving those guys around versus moving the physical product around with tariffs and all that other stuff. And so our platform is really our strive. And so an education company that has a clean perspective, they don't want to just reshape what we're already doing. If you remember back in the 90s with the web, the first thing everyone was doing is taking their catalogs. We called it shovelware, right? And they just put, HTML, just like get that in. There was you weren't taking advantage of what is it? Marshall McLuhan, right? The medium is the message.
Right.
And so your message on TikTok is going to be different than in a book.
Right.
And it's just the nature of it. It's going to be different than a video.
Yeah.
And so that kind of partner is really who we're looking for. Someone that understands the value of having a cogent, intelligent, self-sufficient next generation, because we kind of F the planet up here, people.
Mm-hmm.
And we need people willing to roll up their sleeves and say, tell me what I need to do. I've got some ideas, or, hey, I've got this idea. I need some more money because I want to go build this thing out, whether it's food or what have you. And there's a lot of interesting things we can go on and further conversations on. But yeah, so it's a partner that understands the long view. Gives us, I'd say, we don't need a long leash if we want to. In fact, I prefer to be free range myself, no leash at all.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But with our constraints, right, and thinking about our mission, what we want to do, and that they're along for that ride, doing things in space, absolutely awesome. But the reason why I'd like to do it is to inspire, and most important, bring it back to the blue planet called Earth. Because it's like it's Goldilocks, man. It's like, look at Venus, man, hot as hell, 700 atmospheric pressure, whatever. It's ridiculous, right? Mars, cold, tiny, far away, dusty.
That leads to a question I have as we go to whenever you want to close. You're the boss, but Elon Musk has this idea that we need to engineer a way off our planet. And on that note, I remember when you and I were about, I think, 16, and there was something called the L5 Society, right? Remember that? To build that Earth 2. Remember that movie Earth 2 where they had the whatever happened to all that?
Well, it's a lot of infrastructure. It's a lot of cost, and it's an abstraction. In fact, even today, when we talk about doing things in space, you're saying, well, how about the hunger? How about the homeless? How about all these more we see just going out our front door? Why are you thinking about space? And we look at someone like Elon Musk. I'm not going to defend him or promote him, whatever, but we take a spaceship up there. That's for sure. He gets us up there more times than not.
Yeah. And that's what I was thinking of,
Well, he's a very bright mind, but his scale of time he's skewing it. He really wants to create, he wants to bend the fabric of space time, I guess, and try to do things faster.
Yeah.
I am a layperson, but even by mid-century here, I find it very unlikely, outside of actually maybe having some boots that land on Mars and say, we did it, here's our flag, we're going home.
Yeah.
A settlement, unlikely. Show me you can do it. Show me you can do it in the Sahara.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Show me you can do it down in the Mojave, right? Right. Show me you can actually, with water, that you can actually feed and that the crops you can actually grow, that you actually have this living soil that you can perpetuate. Show me you can make an Eden here before you want to make an Eden in places already screwed up.
Yeah.
Because we're kind of screwing it up. And then with that technology, I think space tech helps us understand and push that time-space window forward dramatically. And if anything, that's the beating drum that you hear from guys like Elon and Bezos. Yeah. Bezos wants to put all industry off-world, right?
I think I'll take
sounds good for the 23rd century, maybe, but it's going to be hard to do today.
I'll take them out of my question, and I'll say that when I first became aware of something called system dynamics, and it went all the way back to a book that was released in 1971 by the Club of Rome, called Limits to Growth. I was introduced to the book when I was 16. Funny, that thing happened when I was 16, but anyway. And then I became an expert in system dynamics modeling. But one of the basic findings, because of the way system dynamics as a thought or modeling paradigm were applicated, came into something called the limits to growth models. And the idea was basically, hey, you know what? We're going to reach a point where our resource consumption is far over replenishment ability, and we're going to reach zero population growth. And arguably, we haven't reached zero population growth. We are still growing with projections of population up to 11 billion. Right now, we're at 8.
Yep.
So my point is, when do we get to, isn't it okay to start thinking about colonization someplace else in some kind of way, or at least having that, not off world, because it implies you're going to dump Earth. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying really the transfer of the species so that we can go on beyond just Earth. That's all. That's what I'm saying. Forget what they say. As far as I'm concerned, I came before they did.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was having this conversation actually earlier today about the limits of growth, and it was more of an economic conversation.
Yeah.
That most economic models are expanding, ever expanding, unlimited resources. And I guess in science they call this the sigmoid curve, the S curve. And have we gone past that curve now of optimal growth, right? And we probably have. And so let's, for a moment, I mean, we're humans, so we're going to think about the humans.
Yeah.
But pick any other species. Doesn't even need to be a mammal, right? But pick a bug. What's the likelihood that we're going to have this diversity, right? In the 22nd century, right? Just even give ourselves 80 years from now or something. That's something to think about. The beauty of this world is its diversity, not just human to human diversity, but in all its forms. You go to different ecosystems, what have you, and all the things we still don't understand, and the amazing chemistry and physical dynamics of these properties when you change temperature, humidity, and pressure, and all that other stuff. That's what gets me excited. That's what keeps me curious. But finding the smart people that spend their life, studying that bug.
Well, I forgot that all sounds like a dramatically effective multi-classroom project for Magnitude IO. Huh?
You got it.
Yeah.
You got it. It's well, you can do it anywhere at any time. During the pandemic, a lot of people were distraught, and we were running our program. And one time we were doing live shows that were like 6 or 7 hours long. People just wanted to have connection. These are educators around the world.
Yeah.
But one of the challenges I gave them, because they were wondering what to do with their kids because the Zoom, fatigue, I said, here's your assignment. Tell your students to grab a notebook, turn off their computer, and go out on their back porch. Close their eyes and listen for 5 minutes. Yeah. Come back in and write down what they heard. Of course, there was no airplanes. There were no cars, right? And it was just nature. You could be in the middle of a city and it was nature. It's like, how many different birds did you hear, right? Now just go out and do some observations. How many different plants do you see in your front yard, right? Dig around in the soil. And when we're kids, before the digital this and that, you get on your bikes and you say, I'll be back after dark, right?
Yeah.
Before dark, rather, right? When the lights come on, you're supposed to be home already. It's like latchkey kids, man.
Yeah. I think about that. I think about what you were saying. I think also, what did I miss most during the pandemic? And I missed going to the Balboa Cafe, being around people, something television, watching a television event, talking about whoever happened to walk in the door at the time. Socialization is so important to our health. I think we take it for granted, and
very important.
Which something might be for Magnitude IO is, how do you here's something else, Ted. How do you in space ensure the maintenance of socialization for your mental health?
This is a big problem. I have a design challenge. It's an icebreaker for 1 hour for schools I haven't worked with before. And the icebreaker starts with, we're on a spaceship. These are kids sometimes from different schools. They're convening in a conference or whatever. I got them for an hour. So we're sitting around these tables, and I said, "We're in a spaceship. We're all in together. What are some requirements we're going to have?" And you got 5 minutes. Write them down. If you want to talk, go ahead. At the end, okay, pencils down, kind of thing. All right, and the reveal is we're on spaceship Earth. All the things that we're thinking about, food and entertainment and working well together. It's like you don't need to be in a freaking spaceship to do that. You got the planet here we got to deal with. And then we break into some of the real challenges like radiation and microgravity, and if you're on the moon, things like lunar regolith, and psychology.
Mm-hmm.
How will you keep your mental faculties? And so I'll end with this because I've taken up an hour of your time here pretty much. During the height of the pandemic, and I was networking all over the place. I don't know if you ever heard of you probably were in Clubhouse.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I did it for like a year.
I started on it, and it was one of those, like every other platform went.
Yeah. And then now it's kind of fizzled out. But I met some amazing partners we're working with today. One was a good buddy of mine in Sydney, now Ben Newsome. We're running a company for 2 decades called Physics Education. And we were talking about this, and they had just locked Sydney down seriously. Alcohol was not being delivered to homes. So it was that bad. It was like, well, they didn't want any of the domestic violence or anything like that, I guess. But everyone's locked in, and you were hearing these phrases: locked in, stuck at home. And I'm there with Ben Newsom. I'm saying, dude, this is just not the right thing for our mental health.
Nope.
Be thinking about locked in, and for the kids, definitely not. Then I said, well, hey, does an astronaut feel this? Do they feel like they're stuck or locked in? And so we launched, this is the 4th year now, and Magnitude is a contributor to this, and it works pretty much, it's been working with the different Australian agencies, the New South Wales Department of Education, massive school district, second largest in the world. It's got about 900,000 students in it. Was the Australian Virtual Astronaut Challenge. In fact, I think later this week, there's maybe it's in tomorrow, there's one of their live segments, and they bring in an expert, kind of like what we do with our live events, and they talk about it. And then there's these different challenges. Ours is growing food and space, but there's Earth observations, there's robotics, there's a lot of different challenges, and it's open to the world. Most of it's focused on Australia, but the idea that that you can transform yourself from thinking about your mindset of being locked in to now you're in an environment in which you can manage and control. As an astronaut, you're not locked in. You have activities you can do and need to do. And so that was just kind of our mindset. I think that's been moving us forward. But always excited to talk to folks. It might be a little scattershot what I'm sharing with you guys. It's more heartfelt than anything else. I am not falling over myself to find a strategic partner. It's my brother had mentioned it because he had dropped by the office here and we talked a little bit about it. Zenny, I really appreciate you just catching up with you, man. We're going to have to do off channel here. Just
absolutely.
but
off and on channel.
Yep.
Oh, by the way, here's your email address, if I may, for people who want to contact you. Okay, it's right here. And voila. Ted at magnitude.io.
Awesome.
Cool.
Hey, Zeddy, thank you very much. There's so much more I can talk about. Some people maybe want numbers and things like that.
Don't be, it's the new way of socialization. Don't be a stranger here. Okay. Hey, you don't have to move a muscle. I got it. Everybody, subscribe to Zenny62 on YouTube if you haven't done so already. We'll be back with more live streams and shorts and videos later today. But that ends this broadcast stream. Ted, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Zeddy.